And I found myself thinking, well, actually building local, building micro-local is going to be really important. So why should we build a village in the city? Why do we need to build micro-local communities? Because it improves your life and the lives of those around you, as I discovered from my own experience. It can build inclusive and cross-generation and cross-demographic connections and conversations. So it's easy in the internet world to get into a bubble of talking to people like you. Hello, everyone. Yes, you are one of my bubbles. Thank you for being there. You know, the world of SF people is lovely, but actually one of the difficulties of the modern world is that we are not having enough conversations between generations, between demographic groups, between classes. And the micro-local provides a good reason to talk to other people who are not like you. So this morning, what I'm going to do is fall into a few parts. I'm going to tell you about how Village in the City came about and how it started. I'm going to get us thinking about how, as solution-focused people, we might go about creating a micro-local community where we live if we wanted to. I'm going to tell you about what happened here in Edinburgh. I'm going to tell you about what's happening around the world. And we have some of our village builders on the call today as well. And also connected up with some other developments in society and community thinking that seem to be relevant at the moment. That also mean a village in the city is not only a good idea, I think, but it's also part of a bigger idea. So, Village in the City is an initiative to encourage people to build micro-local community. Micro-local, I'll tell you about what I mean by micro-local in a minute, but it's small. It's a street or a few blocks, a little patch of a city. And I have, through my life, willfully ignored, for the most part, the place where I live, my neighbourhood. I've been very fortunate to be part of very big international communities, and like Soul World and SFiO, and had friends all over the world. And Jenny and I used to joke that, though we've got friends all over the world, but none in our street. But in a way that didn't matter, because we had friends all over the world, and we were fully taken up with traveling around and meeting all these lovely people and doing interesting things and hanging around in airport lounges and doing all those things that we used to do back in the dim and distant past. And then, of course, came the pandemic. And I noticed immediately the lockdown started here in Scotland and in the UK. Things changed in our street. The street started to communicate in a way that we hadn't. Partly because of Jenny, who had the thought to try and get an email list up together. We knew a few people in the street, but not very well. And Jenny got an email list up, and people were added to that list, and it turned out there were people living in our street who nobody knew about at the start, but they'd been there for years. And then a WhatsApp group got set up, and people started sharing information about shops that were open where you could get fresh vegetables, places that were delivering, offers of support, things like that, just in our street. And also you started to be able to wave to people in the street because you were getting connected with them through these little WhatsApp groups and things. And our street is that's a picture of it behind me at the moment. You can see it, Athol Crescent, Edinburgh. It's rather grand. It's not your average street, I'll admit. Many of those buildings house professional firms, accountants, solicitors, that sort of thing. But there are people living here. There are people living in the top floors. There are people living in the basements. Some of the buildings are houses. And it was always seen primarily as a commercial centre, not a residential centre. So nothing in the way of community. And I sort of started to think that this is a good thing, this community. I like being part of a community. And actually in the lockdown, of course, the world became very small. You couldn't travel. So you end up taking exercise walks around the streets in your area. And I thought, well, actually, this is an interesting thing. And it's the answer to all sorts of different questions. Having a good local focus. These are the reasons. And I thought the future is going to be more local than we thought it was. And I was part of an open space online group thinking about build back better, well-known phrase. How do we build back better? And I found myself thinking, well, actually building local, building micro-local is going to be really important. So why should we build a village in the city? Why do we need to build micro-local communities? Because it improves your life and the lives of those around you, as I discovered from my own experience. It can build inclusive and cross-generation and cross-demographic connections and conversations. So it's easy in the internet world to get into a bubble of talking to people like you. Hello, everyone. Yes, you are one of my bubbles. Thank you for being there. The world of SF people is lovely. But actually, one of the difficulties of the modern world is that we are not having enough conversations between generations, between demographic groups, between classes. And the micro-local provides a good reason to talk to other people who are not like you. Then there's the question of building resilience and mutual support. So it's there when you need it. And it's much easier to ask for help or offer help if you already know the people. So at the beginning of the lockdown, lots of people were trying to sort of build relationships of support from scratch, and it happened. But it's much easier to do that if you've already got some connection with the people around you. Then it's about connecting all the other groups that are in the neighbourhood. So businesses, sport groups, families, churches, secular groups, anyone else. These are all part of the scene. And it's great that there are these different things, but if you can connect them up, you start to really get a proper community. And it acts as a counterbalance to the amazing breakthroughs in online communication. So we can all sit here from around the world and talk about solution focus on a Sunday morning for me. Great, wonderful. But in a way, if I can talk to absolutely anyone in the world, then I also want to talk to other people, the people who live right next to me, the people who've chosen to make their lives within 100 yards or two of where I am. And that's a kind of counterbalance, talking to people in the real world, a counterbalance to talking to people online. And once the community forges an identity, forges connections, people can start to act in empowered and purposeful ways together in a way that they couldn't before. So these all seem to me to be good reasons. And then I started working with other people in this field, and Cormac Russell is one of those people. He's a big figure in the asset-based community development area, which has a lot in common with solution focus. And I'll tell you about that later. And he has a saying that the neighborhood is the answer to lots of modern challenges. And he said that the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to do all these other things, enabling health, raising children, assuring actual safety. That's not safety by having policemen, that's safety by people looking out for each other. Assuring security, stewarding ecology, shaping local economies, local food production, and particularly co-creating care. These are all things that are best done at the neighborhood level, he would say, and I agree with him. So I think neighborhoods are the answer to a lot of the challenges that face us if they can be created in a good way. So I sat down at about last June and thought, all right, suppose we had to create a neighborhood. What would it look like? Well, what's a neighborhood, first of all? A neighborhood is small. It might only be a street. It might just be a few blocks. It certainly isn't more than 3,000 to 5,000 people. And I think you can walk across it in less than 10 minutes if it's in an urban setting. And often it has an existing identity of some kind, which may well be unofficial. People call things, call little areas things. And mine is the West End of Edinburgh. That's actually quite a small and focused place, maybe focused around a park. This is the park in the picture behind this is Dalmeny Park in Leith in Edinburgh, where one of our village builders lives. And the streets around this park form a natural little community, even though it doesn't have an official title. And there are so many neighbourhoods. The city of Edinburgh, population 500,000, has surveyed this, and it thinks there are 154 natural neighbourhoods in Edinburgh. In London, the architect Richard Rogers did a survey and found at least 625 named places within the city of London, within London, the boundary of London. And that's probably an underestimate. Those are named places already, never mind the unofficial ones. And so this is not the same as a local government area or whatever. This is not an administrative area. This is an area where people feel connected to each other. So I sat down on day one of Village in the City and wrote these 6 elements that you need to have a village in the city. First of all, you have to have inclusivity. It has to be for everybody. Secondly, you have to have connection. You have a way of those people talking to each other. And that ideally is a two-way communication thing, so there are one-way communications that look like newsletters and notice boards. Those are good. But you really want ways that people can talk to each other. So things like Facebook groups, very good for that. Have to be run in a good way, but Facebook groups offer options that other things don't. Then you need hosts. And some of you will know that I've been working on the idea of host leadership, leading as a host for many years now. And I think this fits very well. In the classical English village, the 2 hosts used to be the vicar, the priest, and the pub landlord. And between them, they knew everybody, and they had a job in bringing people together in all sorts of different ways. But now we have, those 2 have lost their power. Not so many people go to church, at least here. And the pub is probably more of a restaurant than a community gathering place. So we need other people to step into that gap, to be hosts. For the village, to bring people together. We need meeting places, formal and informal, accessible to all, within walking distance. Now, they don't have to be formal meeting places like village, community halls, for example. They can be pub rooms, they can be cafes, they can be parks, if you're lucky enough to have a marketplace or a place where people bump into each other, that's really good. Then you have inclusive gatherings, things that everyone can be invited to. And they might be annual things like a summer party or a Christmas festival, but they might equally be monthly things or even weekly things that happen, which are open to all. And finally, an identity for the place. What is it that makes this place special? And that's the thing that makes people a little bit proud to be part of their community. And there's all sorts of potential identities. And this identity should not be an exclusive thing. It is something we rally around and we're proud of for our bit, but it's not a reason to go to war with the next bit in an ideal world. So there's my 6 elements of a village in the city. And I started off and I started to think about my patch in terms of those 6 elements. Now, I'll tell you what happened a bit later on. But we are going to have our first breakout session very shortly. As a solution-focused practitioner, how would you go about creating a micro-local community? As a solution-focused practitioner, how would you go about it? And I'd like you to have a think about that together, come up with a few headlines to share and ways that you might get started as a solution-focused practitioner.
So, Mark, over to you.
So headlines about how we might want to build a micro-local community, folks. What works already? Thank you, Ingrid. That's an excellent starting place, isn't it? Yes. That's very much what I started to think as well. Okay, that's a great start. What else, people?
Yeah, I was thinking about noticing what's already there.
Yeah, that's great. Wim, thank you. Yeah, noticing. So you have to sort of open your eyes and start looking around. Definitely, good start. What else?
Invitation.
Yeah.
Say a bit more.
Invitation. So it's not that people should do something. It's an open invitation if the people want to come. So this, I think, is important.
Thank you, Christiana. Yes, that's so important. You can't force people to be in a community, to work in a community or be connected with a community if they don't want to. So it has to be done with invitation. You have to make them kind of want to join or join in, and that takes time, of course. Thank you. So brilliant. Well, John has said people built an identity around one of the parks that was looking sad, started to flourish. Yes. So often having a focal point is another thing. Yes.
Mark, can I say something? It's different here in Singapore because obviously we have a lot of freedom here, and we are not just.
That's a very, very interesting. I must go and read up on Lee Kuan Yew on the topic of freedom. Yes.
Yeah, I know, but freedom within the framework. The framework is very narrow, but since June the 19th, we've been allowed to, throughout we've been allowed to come and go as we like. But one of the things I wanted to say from an SF perspective, just thinking about my community in which I live, my estate, is to maybe acknowledge that what we've been doing and saying it's been fantastic because we're on a chat group, people are inviting people for dinners, and just to acknowledge how wonderful it's been through this. I walk on the green corridor and people are so connected and they reach out to one another and ask after each other, and just to compliment people on that, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, definitely.
We have a group that's also local park based. And I think in the SF way, that's building on what works and also finding what people want. So in the park, there's a sort of negatives and positive examples. The Protect Clarence Park group do want a new playground and have been involved in creating a new playground. And they don't want the football club, which is within the park, St Albans City, to have a 24-hour drinking license. So there's short campaigns gather around things that are wanted or not wanted that can give a focal point of purpose as well as geography.
Thank you, Paul. Excellent. Yes, good.
And I wonder if sometimes the wording of something, we've got several community groups around us, but they're generally friends of. So you've got friends of the park and friends of the church and friends of the walking group, whereas maybe the friends in the park or friends in the church or friends in the walking group might bring in other people that don't think they have to be part of something but can take part in something.
Yeah, that's a very nice distinction, Amanda. Thank you. Friends of and friends in. That's nice. Good. Thank you very much. Excellent. Create some sort of eye catcher, which Katharina then started to write and didn't finish, but maybe she's going to finish it. We had that in our group too. Leah talked about doing something visible and also beautiful, if possible, which is sort of something that people can see that says something is happening, which I think is a very interesting idea. So I'm going to add that to do something visible and beautiful. Is there good?
Yeah, Katharina actually added to it. It's a gratefulness tree. So where you can hang your messages to say what you're grateful for.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea that's being used in all sorts of places. Yeah. Okay. So any other thoughts on this, folks, before we move on?
So once it's more a thought than a headline. What Paul mentioned sounds like there are different interests in the village, and what I think, or what I would be important, is how you can be appreciative even when there are ideas which are totally contrary to what you want. Yeah, and how community building can be kind of inclusive, that everybody is heard and acknowledged, and that there will be a good solution for perhaps nearly everybody. So that this, I want this, I want that, will be more, how can we do it together?
Yes. Yeah, I think this is one of the very interesting points, because you have, inevitably, there will be contrary ideas and contrary views of stuff. And that might be at the level of, do we want the football club with bar in the park or not? Or it might be at the level, as we're going to have in Scotland quite soon, of do we want to be independent or not? And people have all sorts of identities around that. But it seems to me that the point of a micro-local community is a place where we may not share a thought on drinking or independence, but we do share, we live in the same, few hundred square meters. And therefore, that's a good reason to talk to each other. And then rather than not necessarily, and there are ways in which you can work with these ideas. And of course, as solution-focused mediators and conflict resolvers and all of that, there are ways that we would have as professionals of working with that. But here I'm thinking about, we are not simply professionals, we're members of the community as well. So that's the thing. And this is an initiative that's not about us going to other communities and helping them sort it out, although you might do that. But what I'm really getting interested in is, how do you work in your own community? And how do you do that in a way that does those things that you've been mentioning up here about acknowledging and appreciating and finding what's working and those kind of things, which is exactly what we would think. So these are the six headings: inclusivity, connection, hosts, meeting places, inclusive gatherings. So here's what happened in Edinburgh then. So having written my 6 headings, I started to look around for what was happening. And we did have, that is Thou Street, we did have connection beginning. And indeed, I had played the saxophone on the street corner on my front step every day for 12 weeks in the first lockdown, and people came out to listen, and people in the street, came out to their steps and were kind enough to applaud. And it was a little moment of togetherness in the street in the first lockdown. And that's partly what inspired me to carry on. And then I thought, well, what am I bringing to this? Well, solution-focused stuff, my work on host leadership, also my work in Sunday Assembly, which is a sort of community building thing. It's like a sort of church-like thing for people who don't do religion. And I've been involved with that since it started in 2013. And I've given a TEDx talk about host leading, and there I am in the bottom on playing the saxophone at Sunday Assembly Edinburgh. And so, well, actually, I've got some sort of professional input to make to this, as well as being an interested person in my own area. So what happened was, I followed your advice and looked around for what's working. And the first thing I looked around for was, is there a sort of community Facebook group or something? And there was. West End Residents Facebook group. It had 19 members. Not very many, but I joined as the 20th member, made a couple of hopefully useful contributions, and then went and had a chat with the 2 guys who had set it up the previous year before the lockdown, and it hadn't got much traction. And I said, well, look, how about, this could be really good. How about we expand it? And what we decided to do was a leafleting campaign. So we had leaflets printed, and we put them through the letterboxes of everybody in the area. That's several thousand. And we stuck them on lampposts, and we even stuck them on rubbish dumpsters like that one. You see, they're calling all West Enders. Whether if you live here, if you work here, you can join our Facebook group and we'll share stuff. And the membership of the Facebook group started to go up, and it is currently at 960 people in our West End Facebook group. And Paul and Fraser and I worked very hard on moderating it and making sure that it's really for local people. You have to actually live or work here to join. We check everybody. We talk to everybody. We control the number of, the businesses, of course, want to talk, the people with local businesses want to talk to the residents, and you have to control that and make sure they don't overdo it. But it's been a great success, and the response we've had has been people saying, thank goodness somebody finally is taking the West End seriously as a community. We've needed this for ages. Hurrah, well done. So once you have communication like that, you can start to do all sorts of other things. Because if you don't have the communication, it's really hard. Another way of communicating is the notice boards. Now, the council has notice boards around our region, but they were ignored. They hadn't had new things in them for years. But Paul, my friend in the Facebook group, went to the council and he got me a key. So I am now the notice board monitor for Edinburgh West End, at least our end of it. And I curate the notice boards, and there's information about things to do and information about local meetings and things like that in the notice board. It's a really old-fashioned thing, but it's also very inclusive. You don't need to be online to go and have a look at a Facebook group, at a notice board. So I started from that, and we started to get this thing going. And then I thought, well, it's solution focus. I want to create resources that will help people to build their villages. And so I created the very first worksheet, which is our first resource. I created this on day 2. And basically, you probably can't see it in detail, but what it is a scaling. It's a scaling thing where each of these 6 elements of the village in the city are the title of a scale. And so you encourage people to think about, how much connection do we have on a scale from 1 to 10? What's already working? And what might be the next small steps to improving it? And this is a very powerful framework because it got me thinking not only about connection was the place I decided to start by looking for the Facebook group, but also each of these can be built and you can have priorities in different areas as things emerge. And it got me thinking about, well, who are the hosts? Where are the meeting places? What do we have here in Edinburgh West End where people could meet if we could? We can't right now, still. It's very frustrating. What events do we have? We don't have any, but there have been 1 or 2 in the past. How could we build on those? So, if I was to scale us at that point, I'd say that connection, we had about 4. Hosts, we had about 3. Meeting places, we had about 4. Inclusive events, about 2. But identity, about 7. Because everyone's heard of Edinburgh West End in the city. So that's not our problem. And inclusivity, who knows? Nobody knows who lives here. So this idea of using these 6 headings as effectively titles of scales was something that I began to immediately find very useful and interesting. And then what happened as I started putting the word out and started to run, we had a Zoom call like you do, and then we had another Zoom call, and that became a monthly Zoom call where we invited people to join in. And, oops, hold on, I'm going the wrong way. The first other neighborhood to get in touch via a friend of a friend was the Russo neighborhood in Lincoln, Nebraska. And a friend of a friend, Randy Bretts, had started in lockdown. It's a kind of cul-de-sac. It's a dead end with this big wide circle. And this part of Lincoln, Nebraska, bang in the center of the USA, as Randy would say, they'd started having events where they all came out in the evening and talked to each other, socially distanced. Once a week, chat. And Randy saw a connection and started turning up to our events. And so he became the second village in the city. And his place didn't have a name even. So he called it the Russo neighborhood after the Russo High School, which is just across the road. So Randy started, and then Leah, who is on our call today, Leah Davcheva, great friend, she was working in her bit of Sofia in Bulgaria, renovating this triangle of ground and turning it into something visible and beautiful by planting and bringing people together from her little area there to work on that. And there you see them This is the triangle and the people having a celebratory drink. So, and then another area of Edinburgh, Willow Bray, the woman there who organises their community, Lara Cellini, is a fellow Sunday Assembly person and a humanist celebrant like Jenny was. And they've been doing this for years. So, of course, we tapped into that, and they were shared lots of very good ideas about what they did and how they've built this community that there was nothing there until 5 or 6 years ago in community terms, but Lara has built that. And we invite people to put their village on the map. If you want to be part of the Village in the City movement, you can be. There only needs to be one of you to have a startup village. And here's our current map. We have startup villages in yellow and main villages in blue. And we've just added the Musicon corner of Roskilde in Denmark. We've just added Tulln an der Donau, Austria, who've been working a lot together. We've added also, we have a suburb of La Paz, Bolivia, who are joining in, 2 areas of Lincoln, Nebraska, as well as several bits of Scotland and England. And one of the exciting things about this initiative turns out to be that while we are advocating the building of micro-local communities, which are really small, like a couple of 200 or 300 meters across, we're doing it worldwide. And there's something a little paradoxical and interesting about that, having a worldwide movement of very local communities. Ingrid is saying, what about Village in the Village? Yes, absolutely. Most villages have this sorted out at some level, but they could almost all improve, I think, maybe. And I discovered as we went on that actually our part of Edinburgh, the West End, was particularly badly served because it was seen as a commercial area, not a residential area. We hadn't developed community things. And people were very keen to. There are other bits of Edinburgh that have much better developed community stuff already, like Willow Bray. But my idea is that we can all learn together. We can all learn, we can all be improving our own micro-local communities and sharing that and supporting each other and sharing ideas and creating resources about that. So, oops, where are we? And this is, I say, primarily for citizens in their own communities. And I just want to show you here. This is the 2-4 whiz-by diagram of Cormac Russell, which I like very much. These are ways in which people attempt to develop their communities, or other people arrive to develop their communities for them. So at one level, you have the council or the service provider or the charity turn up and they do things to the community. Now, of course, in Solution Focus, we try not to do that, but that does happen. You know, we're gonna improve your community whether you want us to or not. That's not a very good way of working. Then the same people can turn up and do things for the community. At least that is, there is an element of community interest there, but it's still the professionals doing it for you. Then there's the professionals doing it with the community. And finally, we have things that are done by the community, by the people in their communities for themselves. And I'm interested very much in that last category. How do we equip people to do things in their own communities without the support of, you know, interfering professionals and needing to apply for grants and things like that. And there's a great big industry out there in community building, and much of it is good, but a lot of it is premised on other people arriving in your community to develop it for you. And Cormac and I don't think that's a useful thing. We'd like to see much more people doing things in their own communities and then perhaps engaging others to help them, but on the community's terms, not on the professionals' terms. And I think Solution Focus has quite a lot. We are relatively unusual in our focus on taking the client seriously. And there's something about that way of working that chimes in for me with this kind of by the people, for the people, in their community approach. Questions and thoughts before we have a breakout room session to have a chat about what we've heard so far?
Mark, you talk about the inclusivity.
Yes.
Of the whole project, and
I talk about the inclusivity of the power of inclusivity in communities.
And how do you see that? Because I totally agree that within the community, you start talking to people who are different from you, but isn't there also a chance that the people who are very alike will be the community and still not be very inclusive towards the others? I've been working with communities, and I've always still searching for this. How do we make it inclusive? How do we get the sick people to the parties, for example, or the not so people who are not so strong on their legs or things like that?
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent question. There isn't an easy answer, but by putting inclusivity number one in the list, it's a thing to work towards. And it's almost impossible to be inclusive on day one. Mm-hmm. I think you always end up with a certain kind of people come forward, but the thing you must guard against, and I try and get people to guard against, is making the community just for people like you. Mm-hmm. And it's something, as time goes on, you become more able to reach out to the people who are on the edges or can't participate for various reasons, including what you say. And you start to work to see how can we include them. So I think you can't be totally inclusive on day one, but you have to keep it as a kind of really top level priority. Otherwise, you end up with a clique, if you understand that word. A clique, this is a small group who just like being on themselves and they don't care about anybody else. That's not a community. Yeah? No, but it's easy to do, and there are plenty of perfectly nice cliques around that serve the people who are in them well. I don't have a problem with that, with that sort of group, but I have a problem with that being a community in my sense, a village in the city.
Yep.
It's a great point. It's a great point, and it's one that we're still kind of coming to terms with. How do you do that? But the first thing you need is a kind of a starting group, a core group of people who want to do this. So I'll just put the question in the chat. What would be the benefits of building the micro-local community where you live? What's already there? Of course, good question. How might your skills help you and your neighbours? The idea is just to have a chat, 10 minutes, about what we've been talking about, and then there'll be a chance for a discussion afterwards. I'm interested at the moment in what happens if you look at a few hundred square metres. Because I think for me this is the connections you get there are different to the ones you get with perhaps your family or your professional contacts. And it's and I think we need them all. That's my hunch, for sure. And one of the things that just struck me talking to you in the group about your estate, your piece of Singapore, is how wildly different things are in the different places. Some places have got this really sorted already. Others have nothing. Many places in between that could be developed in different directions or need different things to move on a bit. It's very fascinating. And what I'm really excited about is trying to work out how do you offer something to everybody. And so the dog walking and the school and the church, this is all great. The thing is, the power comes when you connect those things. The power comes when you find ways of connecting what's already happening as much as inventing new things, seems to me. And the asset-based community development people are very strong on that as well. Seems also to be a kind of very solution-focused thought. How do you connect up what's there already so that people see it differently and use it differently? I think that's a very interesting way to think about this.
Mark, I was just thinking about, the little local high street with your sort of local amenities. as you were talking about, people, sorry, I'm walking so out of breath, but people not going very far, not going to institutions, and that could be a big supermarket, but supporting local independence.
Absolutely. And people are more likely to support their local independents if they feel connected to them. Yeah. And they know a bit of the story, and they know the people, and they know why they're doing the thing they're doing.
Yes, and you build a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is another important thing about people are getting more and more concerned with the provenance of their food now here. Where's the food coming from? And maybe Tesco's can't tell you in the same way that your corner greengrocer can. So it all feels to me that the world this is pushing in. There's lots of things pushing in this direction at the moment. Well, folks, we just have 5 minutes left. I just want to share one more thing with you, which is what we're planning next. So, Village in the City is at villageinthecity.net. We have a free online community which has just opened, based on the Mighty Network site. You're welcome to join that if you like. We have monthly calls with people with something to say. The next one I mentioned is on Wednesday, 4 p.m. UK time. We also have learning calls for signed up village builders. Anyone can sign up, join our calls. We offer support and encouragement. We offer connection with others. We have resources, including our Village Builders Handbook, which is evolving. That's a free download. We're just about launching a podcast. And in fact, the podcast is already out there. If you go to Apple or Google Podcasts, search on Village in the City, you'll find the first 3 podcasts with me interviewing different people about different aspects of Village in the City. We now have our manifesto in 6 languages. Thank you to Leia and others for translating that. And we also have logos for the project in 6 languages as well. And I'm about to start running 6-week courses, online courses for people who want to think about developing their local community, their neighbourhood, their village in the city. And that's going to be very exciting to actually start helping people in all kinds of situations to do that. But the place to go for all of that is villageinthecity.net. And all our events are free. And please spread the word.
Just very quickly, just like to ask people, would you like to put some affirmations into the chat? Your thoughts on today's session for Mark? Just give him some feedback. If you're out walking, you can say something if you'd like, Tara and other people, not picking on you, but if you are out walking, then, the dog can talk as well if they want.
Yeah, he's got a few words to say.
Yeah. So please just put something in the chat. That's it, and thank you very much indeed. Have a great day, have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.